It's liberty or it's death. It's freedom for everybody or freedom for nobody.
Surviving the tough times is imperative to me. Looking at the whole world revolutionarily.
They don't want to hear you old Uncle Tom handkerchief head talking about the iron.
Technique will force you into strategical retreat because I dominate guerrilla warfare in the streets. There ain't no way to picture me without a victory speech. When I reach higher positions without the recognition of pissed on competition, because I conquered their ambition.
Which is to debate the motion that this House believes that capitalism has failed. On proposition this evening, we have Harpal Brar, who is chairman of the Communist Party of Great Britain, Marxist-Leninist. On opposition this evening, we have Harpal Brar, QC, who is an expert in finance and banking services, and in 2010 was voted Barrister of the Year. We have Dr. Eamon Butler, who is director of the Adam Smith Institute, and Michael Britton, who is the Director General of the Institute of Economic Affairs. So I'm sure you'll agree, a very great lineup. Without further ado then, I will ask Harpal Brar to open the case for proposition.
Madam President, fellow debaters, students, first of all, I'd like to take advantage of this meeting to say how grateful I am to the Durham Students' Union for inviting my organization to send a speaker to this debate. Since it's my third visit here, it's clear to me there are some secret communists here who are very happy to have us, and I'm very pleased to know that we are infiltrating everywhere, including this privileged and august place of learning. I am really nobody. All these people come from various institutions. They're practicing barristers and high flyers. All I can say for myself is I'm a representative of the class that is the ruling class in waiting. And with this, I go on to discuss this motion. The motion is this House believes that capitalism has failed. It seems to me it's so obvious that it didn't require a debate. Capitalism has obviously failed. Apart from the three speakers who are opposing us, is there really anybody in this hall who feels that capitalism somehow has not failed? It's like having a motion saying this House believes that Napoleon is dead. Now, what we are really witnessing at the moment is the worst possible crisis of capitalism since the 1929 to 45 depression. And thanks to war and killing of 50 million people, we came out of the crisis last time. I hope it won't require that many deaths before this crisis is over. Now, when I'm speaking to a very erudite and intelligent audience, and it's therefore easier to discuss this rather opaque subject. When you read the stuff in the press, and you read the best papers in this country, like the Financial Times, I'm not paid to advertise the Financial Times, I'm just making the point. If you do that, they're all going on financial crisis, problems with the banks. It isn't really a financial crisis, it's a crisis of overproduction, which the bourgeois journalists and commentators avoid using, like a thief really does not like visiting the place of his crime, or the place of his theft. They'll say there's not sufficient demand in the economy. It doesn't really matter whether you say there's not sufficient demand or there is too much production. The fact of the matter is capitalism is a flawed system for the simple reason the way it works, it soon produces goods that nobody can buy. Capitalists do not produce for the fun of it. They do not produce because the students at Durham University need the things that they produce. They produce to make money. And how do they make money? Who are the biggest buyers of the merchandise? They are the ordinary workers. And capitalism employs workers, and when they're employed there, they work and add new value. Out of the new value they add, they get part paid to them as wages, and the rest goes to the capitalist. The capitalist can only use part of it for his personal consumption. Even a capitalist cannot eat 100 chickens. Even a capitalist cannot live in 200 houses on the same night. Even a capitalist cannot have 300 cars for the same day. So most of capitalist money goes on productive consumption, i.e. setting up establishments which make more money. But in order to be able to set up these establishments, they've got to be able to sell, there's got to be buyers. And since capitalism constantly impoverishes the working class, it's not in the end possible for capitalists to dispose of all their things. So capitalism, ever since it became a system, around about 1825, it has witnessed an endless series of crises of overproduction when things cannot be disposed of. And when things cannot be disposed of, and there are not profitable opportunities for investment, what do the capitalists do? They indulge in speculation. They indulge in gambling. Now, gambling can be with cards, or it can simply be you go to a thatched hut and you pull a straw and I pull a straw and the one with the longest one will win. It can be more sophisticated, it can be very simple. It can be through structured instruments, it can be through securitization, it can be just gambling on the stock exchange. And when that happens, there's a frenzy, lots of people make money, like the sponsor of this debate has been making a lot of money. But of course, the music does stop sometime. And when the music stops, you have to stop dancing. And the result of stopping to dance recently was that the entire imperialist financial system was in a near meltdown. And when that happens, if you and I can't pay our debts, we go bankrupt. But what happens with big businessmen, with bankers is, the governments then come to rescue them. Because these people are too big to fail. They're too big to fail, so the taxpayer gets the bill and they get rescued. This is really what I call socialism for monopoly capitalists. And capitalism for you, because you've got to pay the taxes to rescue them. Now they've been rescued, they come back and they're making money. Now they're telling the governments who have bankrupted themselves in trying to rescue the banks, they're telling the governments now, you're not creditworthy. We can't loan you, or we loan you at very, very high cost. So the governments are leaning on the capitalists and the capitalists are leaning on the governments. Have you ever seen, after going to a pub, drunkards come, two drunkards, trying to lean against each other to stay upright? So the governments are bankrupt, the capitalists are nearly bankrupt but been rescued. So this is what it is, and this is not free market capitalism. Now we've got here a representative of the Adam Smith Institute. You cannot have anything other than respect for Adam Smith. But Adam Smith belongs to a completely different era. It was the late 18th century, lived mainly in farming communities. There was free competition capitalism those days. Capitalists were small. Adam Smith was totally opposed to monopolies. Now, what would life be without monopolies these days? There has been such a concentration of production that there is a monopoly everywhere. You cannot escape monopoly from the day you're born to the day you drop dead. You are students, now they're taking away your privilege of having free education, you've got to borrow money. Who do you borrow it from? One of the monopoly institutions, monopoly capitalists, one of the banks, HSBC, Barclays, TSB, whatever it might be. You then go to work for a monopoly capitalist. You work 30, 40 years, you retire. And when you're working, you don't have any escape from monopoly capitalism. Your alarm rings at 6:30 in the morning, and it literally is saying, monopoly capital is calling you, get up, you wage slave, and come to work. So you travel in your car, which is made by a monopoly capitalist firm, and having done 30, 40 years, you drop dead. And you probably taken to the crematoria, which is run by monopoly capital, in a hearse which is produced by monopoly capital. So you can't escape monopoly capital. Now, it wouldn't be so bad if it's just monopoly. But the fact of the matter is, free capitalism, having developed into a monopoly, has certain consequences. It does two things. One of the chief characteristics of monopoly capital is export of capital. National boundaries have become too suffocating. There are not profitable opportunities for investment, so capitalists invest abroad. So jobs get exported. I don't blame the monopoly capitalists for doing so. If you had money, and there were 3 banking institutions, one was giving you, and you'd be lucky to get 2%, another 3%, another 4%. Where do you think you'd put your money? The one that gives you 4%. So capitalists can make much more money by exporting capital, because where they're exporting, labor is cheap, there's no regulation, land is cheap, everything is cheap. They're making a lot of money. So they're depriving workers in the heartlands of capitalism of the jobs. Now it does two things. They're making lots of money, and they at the same time get you to be nationalistic against the people to whom these jobs have been exported. And if you listen to the debates in this country, in the House of Commons, the government will accuse the opposition of exporting jobs. And the opposition will say, well, you were doing the same when you were in government. You listen to the debate between Obama and Romney. It really is a fruitless debate, because what they cannot notice is the elephant in the room, namely capitalism, with this crisis of overproduction and export of capital. And what we are in the Communist Party of Great Britain interested in knowing is to tell people it's not the fault of the governments, it's not the fault of individual capitalists, they're not evil-minded. They're not evil-minded people. They are people who are running a particular system. And they are only the living incarnations of capital, which actually does not let them rest. That's the way it works. And on top of that, under imperialism, the world has been divided up completely. In order to actually, for anybody to have a place in the sun, they got redivided. It leads to wars. And in the 20th century, there have been 2 world wars and endless number of other wars. Over 120 million people's lives have been claimed by capital just to keep on carrying on with this outmoded system. It does not deliver to people at all. In the whole world, there are 1 billion people. I'm sure you can't do that, can it? Yeah? Please, just a couple of minutes. In the whole world, there are 1 billion people who live on $1 a day. There are another 2 billion who live on less than $2 a day. 13 million children die each year of preventable diseases and of malnutrition related diseases before they reach the age of 5. There is no monument to them. No, nobody remembers them. They die in their mother's arms. That's what capitalism is doing. And if you think that's the only thing it does, and it does only to poor people, no, it's not delivering in the heartlands of capitalism either. Look at Britain. At the moment, there's 8% of the population, or just under 8%, that's unemployed. A third of the people live in poverty, a third of whom are children. There are 3 million children in this country that live in poverty. It's one of the richest countries where 40,000 people die each year of hypothermia. Look at the United States, the richest country in the world. 42 million people are on food stamps. 40 million people, despite the Obamacare, which has been subject to so much debate, have no health cover. 16% of the households go hungry, according to the Agriculture Department of the US. There are millions of people who are poor, who live in poverty. Millions of people who are having their homes possessed, repossessed. That's the position in a country like the United States. And yet in the United States, there's 1% of the population that owns 25% of the wealth of the United States. Similar figures can be produced for this country and of every other capitalist country. So capitalism really just does not deliver. On top of that, it's involving people in endless wars, not only the First and the Second World War, the war in Vietnam, the war in Korea, the war against Yugoslavia, the war against Syria, the war against Libya, the war against Iraq, which killed over 2 million people, the war against Afghanistan. It's constantly waging war against people abroad, and it's attacking working people at home. So I put it to you that capitalism is imposing too high a price. It's a flawed system. It cannot work. I used to hear, year after year, Marxism is dead. Why do you have to, if it's dead, why do you have to say it's dead? After all, you don't go around saying every day Napoleon is dead. If you did do that, people will laugh in your face. Well, we know Napoleon is dead. And yet Marxism rises each time it's pronounced dead. And now, with the latest crisis, even the bourgeois ideologues have dusted off their copies of Capital Volume 1 and say, Marx had a great number of things to say, we really have something to learn from him. Even the BBC made a film on Karl Marx. Wonderful film, it exposes what capitalism is and how flawed it is. And the presenter of the program says, the irritating thing is, Marx doesn't say what is to take the place of capitalism. Now, that journalist is far too intelligent to be believed when she says that. She is employed by the BBC, she's got to please her employer that Marx really doesn't have a way out of capitalism. Marx has a perfectly good way. In his earliest document, the Communist Manifesto, as well as in Capital Volume 1, as well as a number of other places, Marx says it's the working class that is the special product of capitalism which will overthrow capitalism and establish, don't let your blood curdle, establish the dictatorship of the proletariat. That's what Marx says. Now, dictatorship of the proletariat arouses everybody's hatred, saying, so you communists don't believe in democracy. No, we do believe in democracy. We believe in working class democracy, the name for which is the dictatorship of the proletariat. Just as we think bourgeois democracy is the dictatorship of the bourgeoisie. That's how the bourgeoisie rule. The final bastion of bourgeois rule is not parliament, it's not the ministers, it's not anybody else, it's the army, it's the police, it's the judiciary, it's the civil service. That's what keeps on going. So we want working class democracy, which is democracy for 95% of the population, as opposed to the democracy that you have today, which is for 5% of the population. I have been told several times my time is up, so I can't carry on. All I ask you is, it's clear to me, and I'm sure it's clear to you, that capitalism is failing. It is a failed system, and I hope you will support the motion. Thank you so much.